How did a small island off the coast of mainland Europe rise to become one of the most powerful and far-reaching empires in history? The United Kingdom, comprising England, Scotland, Wales and later Ireland, transformed from a modest island nation into a global superpower. This is the story of how the UK rose to dominate world affairs, shaping politics, culture and economies across the globe. The rise of the UK was not a sudden event. It was the result of centuries of political unification, economic development, maritime innovation, and a series of military conquests and alliances. From the medieval consolidation of power in England and Scotland to the naval dominance that would later characterise the British Empire, the UK's story is one of gradual evolution into a world power. The early kingdoms and the Norman conquest. Before the United Kingdom as we know it existed, the British Isles were home to several distinct kingdoms. Anglo-Saxon England, Celtic Scotland and Wales all had separate identities and rulers. However, one event in 1066 would forever change the course of English history, the Norman conquest. In 1066, William the Conqueror, Duke of Normandy, invaded England and won a decisive victory at the Battle of Hastings. The Norman conquest brought about profound changes in England, laying the foundation for a centralised monarchy. The Normans introduced feudalism, a new system of governance, and reshaped the English legal system, which would later influence not only the UK, but also countries across the globe. William's rule marked the beginning of a long process of consolidation in the British Isles. Over the next several centuries, England would assert dominance over Wales and Ireland, while the relationship with Scotland remained complex, often involving conflict, but eventually leading to union. The creation of Great Britain and the Acts of Union. The next major step in the rise of the United Kingdom came in the early 18th century. England and Scotland had been separate kingdoms with their own parliaments, but they shared a monarch after the union of the crowns in 1603, when James VI of Scotland became James I of England. However, it wasn't until 1707, under the reign of Queen Anne, that the Acts of Union were passed, formally uniting England and Scotland into a single political entity, Great Britain. This union created a more stable and powerful kingdom, one that would soon emerge as a major player in European and global affairs. A second Act of Union in 1801 would later bring Ireland into the fold, creating the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. These unions were essential to the development of a unified British state, setting the stage for the nation's global ambitions. Maritime power and the age of exploration. One of the key factors behind the rise of the United Kingdom was its maritime prowess. Surrounded by water, Britain was uniquely positioned to become a seafaring nation. In the late 16th century, English explorers and privateers like Sir Francis Drake began to challenge Spanish dominance at sea and establish England's presence in the Atlantic. Britain's navy became one of its greatest assets, allowing the kingdom to explore, trade, and ultimately colonize territories far from its shores. The age of exploration opened new frontiers for Britain, leading to the establishment of colonies in North America, the Caribbean, and Asia. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Britain had established a number of profitable colonies, especially in the West Indies, where sugar plantations became a key part of the British economy. The foundation of the East India Company in 1600 marked the beginning of British influence in India, which would later become the crown jewel of the British Empire. The Industrial Revolution and economic growth. By the mid-18th century, Britain was poised to take another giant leap forward with the advent of the Industrial Revolution. While other European countries had powerful militaries and empires, Britain was the first to undergo a complete transformation of its economy, driven by innovations in technology and manufacturing. The Industrial Revolution began in Britain in the late 18th century and rapidly expanded through the 19th century. The development of the steam engine, advances in textile production, and the growth of coal mining and iron industries transformed the British economy, turning it into the workshop of the world. With its rapidly expanding economy, Britain became the world's leading industrial power. This economic growth fueled the expansion of the British Empire, as Britain sought new markets and resources to support its industries. British goods, from textiles to machinery, were exported across the globe, solidifying Britain's dominance in global trade. The British Empire at its height. By the mid-19th century, Britain was at the height of its imperial power. The British Empire had become the largest empire in history, with colonies and territories on every inhabited continent. The phrase "the sun never sets" on the British Empire was coined to reflect the sheer global reach of British rule. In India, the British East India Company had grown to control vast swathes of territory, and following the Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British Crown took direct control of India, making it the most prized possession of the empire. In Africa, the British participated in the scramble for Africa in the late 19th century, establishing colonies in places like Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria. London became the centre of this vast empire, a global hub of finance, politics, and culture. British influence was felt in every corner of the world, and the empire's trade networks facilitated the flow of goods, people, and ideas across continents. The British Navy, the largest and most powerful in the world, ensured that Britain's dominance of the seas remained unchallenged. The Age of Pax Britannica. From 1815 to 1914, a period known as Pax Britannica, Britain enjoyed relative peace and global supremacy. After defeating Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, Britain became the unrivaled leader of world affairs. The Royal Navy patrolled the seas, and British economic and political influence extended to nearly every continent. During this time, Britain championed free trade and industrial capitalism, promoting economic growth across its empire. The country's industrial might allowed it to maintain its imperial control, while British diplomacy played a key role in maintaining balance among European powers, preventing major conflicts for nearly a century. However, the period of Pax Britannica was also one of great social and political change at home. Britain began to implement social reforms, including the expansion of voting rights, the abolition of slavery in 1833, and the reform of working conditions in the industrial cities. These changes reflected Britain's growing sense of responsibility as a world power, even as it continued to exploit its colonies for economic gain. Challenges and decline. Despite its dominance, the British Empire faced growing challenges by the early 20th century. The rise of competing powers, such as Germany and the United States, began to threaten Britain's global supremacy. The First World War, which began in 1914, was a massive strain on the empire, leading to widespread devastation and a loss of life on an unprecedented scale. While Britain emerged victorious from the First World War, it was deeply weakened. The war had drained its resources, and the global balance of power had shifted. The interwar period saw the rise of independence movements in colonies like India and Ireland, as more and more people began to question British rule. The aftermath of World War II and decolonization. The Second World War was even more devastating for Britain. Although the UK played a crucial role in defeating Nazi Germany, the war left the country financially and physically exhausted. In the aftermath of the war, Britain could no longer afford to maintain its vast empire. In the decades following the war, Britain underwent a process of decolonization, granting independence to many of its former colonies. The most notable of these was India, which gained independence in 1947, followed by a wave of decolonization across Africa, the Caribbean, and Asia in the 1950s and 1960s. Though the British Empire has largely faded, the United Kingdom remains a major global player, both economically and politically. The legacy of the empire is still felt in the former colonies, and the impact of British culture, language and institutions continues to shape the modern world. The lasting legacy of the United Kingdom. The rise of the United Kingdom from a small island nation to a global superpower is one of the most remarkable and complex stories in world history. At its height, the British Empire governed over a quarter of the world's population and controlled vast territories across every continent. From its early beginnings as a maritime nation to its role as the dominant global empire, Britain shaped the modern world in profound ways. Its military prowess, economic strength and naval dominance allowed the UK to project power across the globe, expanding its influence into North America, Africa, Asia and the Pacific. This transformation from a small medieval kingdom to a worldwide empire stands as one of the most significant phenomena in global history. Even though the British Empire officially ended in the 20th century, its legacy continues to be felt in various ways. One of the most evident impacts of the UK's global reach is the English language, which is now the world's most widely spoken second language and a dominant force in global communication, diplomacy, business and the internet. English has become the global lingua franca, largely due to Britain's historical expansion and the subsequent rise of the United States. Additionally, many countries that were once part of the empire, such as India, Canada, Australia and South Africa, still maintain significant cultural, legal and political ties to the UK through institutions like the Commonwealth and legal systems based on English common law. The UK also left a profound impact on the development of global political and economic systems. The British parliamentary system and democratic governance became models for emerging nations, while Britain's role in shaping capitalism and global trade networks laid the foundation for modern economics. The Industrial Revolution, which began in Britain, transformed not only its economy, but also the global economy, introducing new modes of production, technology and labour systems that redefined the modern industrial world. This period of economic expansion and innovation positioned the UK at the centre of global finance and commerce, a legacy still visible in cities like London, which remains one of the world's leading financial hubs. However, the legacy of the British Empire is not without its darker chapters. Colonial rule often came at the expense of indigenous populations, leading to exploitation, resource extraction, and cultural disruption in many parts of the world. The history of British imperialism is marked by both the spread of infrastructure, education, and governance, as well as the marginalisation, resistance, and revolts of colonised peoples. In places like India, Africa, and the Caribbean, the impact of British rule has had lasting consequences, shaping contemporary struggles for national identity, post-colonial governance, and economic independence. Today, debates about the legacy of the empire continue, and while the United Kingdom's influence remains strong, it is viewed through the lens of both its achievements and its controversial history of empire building.